What if I told you there was an MLB player who prioritized location and movement so much, it seemed as though he couldn't miss a single pitch? A player who regularly threw one of the slowest fastballs in baseball, but still became a 4-time Cy Young winner, World Series champion, and a Hall of Famer. This player is of course none other than Greg Maddux. And to find out how he was able to become one of the greatest pitchers of all time, despite his unorthodox method, we need to go back to Las Vegas, Nevada in the early 80s. Throughout this time, Maddux and his brother Mike were training under the supervision of former MLB scout Ralph Meter, who instilled in their heads that the value of location and movement was far more important than how hard one could throw. This resonated with Maddux, and he immediately started using this pitching ideology. Throughout his high school days, he found immense success using this method, even bringing his team to a state championship. Although each scout was left unimpressed by his stature, they saw a scrawny 5'11" kid who weighed 145 pounds and wrote him off. Except for Chicago Cubs scout Doug Mapson, who stated, "I really believe this boy would be the #1 player in the country if only he looked a bit more physical." Mapson would later recommend the Cubs take him in the second round of the 1984 draft. And sure enough, once they were on the clock, Maddux became a member of the Cubs organization. This was a surreal moment for him, as he always dreamt about hearing his name called in the draft. But at 18 years old, there was still a long journey ahead of him to make it to the major leagues. And it all started with the Cubs' rookie affiliate, the Pikeville Cubs, located in Kentucky. This was a long ways away from his hometown of Las Vegas, and was also his first time away from his family for an extended period of time. So despite excelling in his first professional season, he couldn't bear the distance between he and his loved ones. So he was ready to give up and head home. That was until one of his minor league teammates, Bob Mandeville, took him in and made sure to help him during times in which he felt homesick. He did this by playing cards with him and helping him connect with his other teammates.
Well, I learned a lot. I pretty much learned how to live. I mean, you have to adapt to your new environment, and I learned all the do's and don'ts.
With this more grown-up approach, he was able to stick around and fight throughout his desire to return home. And as we all know, it was a good thing he did. But before that, he was still fighting his way up the minor league ranks, hoping to get a chance. Then, after a dominant summer at AAA in 1986, he was called up at the tail end of the season to make his major league debut, something he was very proud to make.
In the last 2.5 years just zipped right by, and here I am. I couldn't ask for anything better right now.
His first start came against the Cincinnati Reds, a team he idolized growing up. But on this Sunday afternoon, he showed no mercy. All game long, he was carving through the Reds lineup with ease, en route to a complete game performance, only allowing 3 earned runs, giving him the win in just his first start. Momentum he looked to carry over his final few appearances of the '86 season, with his final start coming against the Philadelphia Phillies on September 29th. And by chance, his brother Mike was the opposing pitcher. The two had faced each other countless times in their backyard growing up. Now getting the opportunity to do it in the big leagues was a dream moment for the pair. But at the end of the day, they still had a job to do, so they took the game just like any other. All afternoon long, the two battled, but in the end, one brother came out on top. After Mike was hit hard early on, allowing 3 runs in only 3 innings, Greg was able to pitch deeper, allowing 3 runs in 7 2/3 innings, lining his team up for a comfortable 8-3 victory, giving him bragging rights within the family and great confidence heading into the offseason. And sure enough, once spring training rolled around, he earned a spot in the rotation to begin the year. This was his moment to truly break out. However, his first full season in the big leagues was a wake-up call for the star prospect. All season long, nothing went right for Maddux, and was leaving some around the sport questioning whether or not he would ever be able to transcend into the superstar he was touted to become. So after finishing the year with an ugly 5.61 ERA, as well as a 9-21 record in games he pitched, he knew he needed to make a change, and fast. This meant finding a sports psychologist in the off-season. It was then he truly realized how much of baseball isn't actually played on the field, saying, "If the game is more than 60% mental, shouldn't I spend 60% of my time training the mental side of the game?" So all off-season long, he spent hours working to make his mind a temple, understanding that he could only control so much, and the thought of fans and coaches were not in his control. Now being relieved from the pressure he put on himself, he was able to pitch freely for the first time in his career.
What's the biggest difference between the Greg Maddux of 1987 and the Greg Maddux right now?
Well, I think I developed some confidence in my breaking ball and my changeup, how to throw it and maybe when to throw it, and I think that's probably been the biggest difference this year.
Whatever it may have been, it worked, and he was rewarded with his first All-Star selection. It was the breakout most were anticipating from Maddux. For him, it was an impressive demonstration of if he put his mind to something, he could achieve anything he wanted in baseball. So with this mindset, he shifted his focus on the '89 season. Now being the bona fide ace of the rotation, his goal was clear: bring the Cubs back to the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. It wasn't going to be an easy task, especially with their division rivals, the New York Mets, coming off a 100-win season. But he put his head down and got to work, maliciously attacking batters month after month, regularly pitching deep into games, and never missing a start, helping the Cubs to a first-place finish in the division, only their second time doing so in 45 years. So with their sights now set on postseason action, they dreamt of hoisting the Commissioner's Trophy in Wrigley, something they hadn't been able to do since 1908. But with Maddux on the mound, they believed anything was possible. Well, everyone except the Giants.
But Greg Maddux, somewhat disillusioned, gives up 3 runs, 4 hits, and at the end of half an inning, Giants 3, Cubs coming up.
Head gets to the strike zone, very quick bat speed.
A drive to right and deep. Dawson going back on the track to the ivy. It's gone. High drive into deep right field. It is a grand slam home run. And that has broken it wide open. The Giants 8 and the Cubs 3.
It was written in the stars for Maddux to steer his team to victory, but in the playoffs, he couldn't help but let the boat sink. It was a painful end to his first playoff experience, and while he did try his best to lift them back to postseason success, the stars never seemed to align. Because while he continued to evolve into the game's best pitcher, the Cubs faded back towards the bottom of the pack, which was part of the reason why they didn't give what Maddux wanted as he entered his contract year in 1992. The other reason was because they stated how he never won 20 games and never won the Cy Young. So after Maddux did precisely that in 92, he was confident the club would tender him the contract he desired. But to his surprise, they didn't, and allowed him to walk in free agency. It's always easy to judge in hindsight, but even then it seemed like a foolish decision to let the best pitcher in baseball walk. So as you'd expect, every competitive ball club was eager to get his signature. Teams like the Yankees and Dodgers were geared up to bring him to a big market. It was even reported the Yankees were the team offering the most money. But for Maddux, that wasn't his main priority. Instead, it was winning and staying in the NL. Because back then, the National and American League did not face off against each other in the regular season, which meant leaving to go to the Yankees would force him to face hitters he'd never seen before. That's why he decided to sign a 5-year, $28 million contract with the Atlanta Braves. Chump change nowadays for your average player, but back then it was a lucrative deal, which saw him soar to one of the highest paid players in the game, while also inserting himself into a starting rotation which boasted star pitchers in Tom Glavine and John Smoltz. These three made up the most feared trio in the bigs and gave the Braves hope they could finally get over the hump in the playoffs. After all, they had been to the World Series the previous 2 seasons, but lost to the Minnesota Twins and then the Toronto Blue Jays, meaning the franchise was still looking for their first World Series title since relocating to Atlanta in 1966. But now with Maddux, they were the favorites. A place where Maddux was cherished for the previous decade, but in the matter of a few months, he was now an enemy. The crowd made sure to let him know this by booing him upon his entrance.
Greg Maddux, you might have expected that reaction from the crowd.
But instead of letting the emotions of the contest deter him from his game, he went out to prove to the Cubs organization what a huge mistake it was to let him go. Pitch after pitch, he found the strike zone, dominating his former teammates. It wasn't until the 9th before he ran into some trouble, getting pulled with 1 out in the inning. Typically, after 8 1/3 innings of shutout ball, Wrigley Field would erupt in celebration, but not this time, a prime example of how baseball is a business at the end of the day. With this in mind, Maddux didn't allow the negativity to impact his future with the Braves. In fact, he only seemed to get better. In 1993, he won his second straight Cy Young. He followed it up with another victory in 1994, and then for the first time in Major League history, a fourth consecutive in 1995. At the time, this was the most dominant pitching stretch in MLB history, with each Cy Young seemingly better than the last, lowering his ERA to almost 1.5 for the final two, and recording 19 wins to just 2 losses in 95. Everyone around the sport was in awe of Maddux because what he was doing on the mound had never been done before, and it was all thanks to his pitching philosophy, that being never to chase velocity, but rather ensure that his movement and location were as sharp as they could be. This allowed him to manipulate pitches so well, they would look like balls 5 feet in front of home plate before moving back into the zone for a strike. He was the best to ever create this illusion. So it comes as no surprise during this 4-year window, it seemed like whenever he was on the mound, he physically couldn't miss a pitch. It was this elite control of his pitching arsenal, which is why Greg Maddux is heavily regarded as one of the greatest of all time. Yet leading up to the 1995 season, he never truly found postseason success. Sure, he led the Cubs to the playoffs in '89, but struggled in his 2 starts. And in his first 2 postseason appearances for the Braves, he allowed 8 runs in 12 2/3 innings. He still had an incredible supporting cast around him, but Atlanta was growing tiresome from their lack of success in the postseason, suffering defeat after defeat after defeat. Something needed to change. That's why there was added pressure facing the club as they entered the 1995 playoffs. A defeat would yield yet another season of coming up just short, so with this in mind, Maddux got to work. And while the Rockies were able to touch him up for 7 runs across 14 innings, they were able to narrowly escape the first round. It was nice to advance to the championship series, but Maddux knew he needed to be better. After all, those 2 games against the Rockies was the worst 2-game stretch of his season. In the playoffs, he was only going to be facing the toughest opposition. It was time to buckle down. After the Braves took the first 2 games of the championship series against the Reds, he took the mound in the third to put them within 1 victory of the World Series. As you would expect, the added thought of making it to the Fall Classic for the first time in his career was motivation enough to turn in a stellar outing, capping off his evening with 8 innings of 1-run ball, helping the Braves jump ahead 3-0, and sure enough, the next game, they were able to shut out the Reds' bats to secure their 3rd World Series appearance of the 90s. This was it. The Braves had made it to baseball's biggest stage in 91 and 92, but couldn't get over the hump. In fact, of their 8 losses during those 2 series, they lost by 1 in 7 of them. They always came up just short. But now they had Greg Maddux, who despite feeling the immense pressure of being in the World Series, was poised to turn things around for Atlanta, although the Indians lineup wasn't going to let him off so easy. The first batter, Kenny Lofton, reached on an error by shortstop Rafael Belliard. It wasn't Maddux's fault, but now it was his job to contain him at first base. A difficult task as Lofton was in the midst of leading the American League in steals for 5 straight years. He knew he was going to run, so he checked on him multiple times and even pitched out to the next batter. Yet in the end, he couldn't control much as Lofton comfortably stole second base. Then 2 pitches later advanced another 90 feet to put him in prime position for Carlos Baerga to cash him in. And unsurprisingly, he was able to do so via another ground ball to the shortstop. This time he was able to pick it cleanly and throw to first. But the damage had already been done. The Indians jumped ahead 1-0 before the Braves even had the chance to bat. It was starting to feel like deja vu for Atlanta fans. In the 1991 World Series, they also blundered key moments, such as Lonnie Smith's base running error in the 8th inning of Game 7. With the score tied 0-0 and Lonnie on first, Terry Pendleton sent a fly ball to deep left center field, giving plenty of time to score from first, but while rounding second base, he couldn't pick up the ball and was only able to make it to third. A huge mistake, but they still had runners on second and third with nobody out. An opportunity which should have yielded at least 1 run. However, Jack Morris was able to escape the jam to keep the 0-0 deadlock intact. The Braves then went on to lose the game and series after a heartbreaking walk-off single in the bottom of the 10th. Fast forward a year to 1992, and more mistakes hindered their ability to win, such as their struggles hitting with runners in scoring position, managing just 13 hits in 54 at-bats, including just 1 out of 9 in Game 6. Now in 1995, their glove-first shortstop Rafael Belliard made an easy error on the first batter of the game, and the Indians would then take the lead without recording a hit in the inning. But despite the adversity Maddux was facing already, it was his job to settle everything down. Throughout the next few innings, he was lights out, even managing to retire 12 in a row at one point. His calmness helped keep the Braves in the game and allowed them to take a 3-1 lead in the 7th inning. It was all the cushion he needed as he finished off the Indians' bats with a complete game performance and a narrow 3-2 victory. Winning Game 1 was crucial to show them they belonged, but more importantly, Maddux's dominant pitching performance was a sign that despite the Indians having by far the best offensive lineup in the game, they were beatable. Sure enough, the Braves' other starters were able to follow suit and dominate their lineup, capping off their impressive season with their first championship in Atlanta.
Left center field, Grissom on the run. The team of the 90s has its world championship.
He had done it. Greg Maddux, the best pitcher in baseball, was finally able to cap off his impressive regular season performances with baseball's crown jewel, the World Series title. A moment he dreamt of when he was just a skinny teenager playing high school baseball in Las Vegas. This trophy was a reflection upon years and years of hard work, sacrifice, and the lengths one will go to become the best in the game.
But this is great. We're happy. We're happy for these people and happy everybody came out here to celebrate with us.
1995 was without question the peak of Maddux's playing days, but he continued to anchor the Braves' rotation over the next few years. From 1996 to 2000, he never missed a start, continuing to post ERA figures below 3 and finished top 5 in Cy Young voting 4 times. So as you would expect, the Braves were able to remain in a contention window, winning the division in each of his 11 seasons in Atlanta. Maddux even continued to get better in the playoffs. In 96, he combined for 15 2/3 innings pitched, with only 3 runs allowed in the World Series. And in 99, he pitched another solid game in the World Series, going 7 innings, allowing 2 earned runs. However, despite the great success he found on the mound, his teammates weren't able to say the same, as the Braves were only able to win 1 World Series title during his 11-year stay, despite winning the division each season and making the Fall Classic 3 times. So when his contract came to an end after the 2003 season, he decided at 38 years old it was time to return to Chicago for the final few years of his career. And as you would expect with him returning to Wrigley Field in the home team's uniform, he was serenaded by every fan in attendance. While he was no longer the same starting pitcher he was when he started his career in Chicago, he stayed durable, making every start, posting over 200 innings pitched each year, and had a slightly above average ERA. He also continued to etch his name as an all-time great when he reached 300 victories on August 7, 2004, and 3,000 strikeouts on July 26, 2005. Then, following a couple brief stints with the Dodgers and Padres from 06 to 08, he retired at the age of 42. Maddux's impact on the game of baseball was substantial. While power pitchers such as Randy Johnson were seeing blazing fastballs past their opponents, Maddux went for a more controlled approach, opting to prioritize movement and location rather than how fast he could throw the ball. In fact, his fastball occasionally dipped to the mid-80s towards the end of his career, which in today's game would be unheard of. Each passing year, it seems as though some velocity record is being broken. Whether it be fastest four-seamer, cut fastball, or average fastball, velocity is the key attribute every aspiring big league pitcher is chasing, and the one every coach is pushing. But when pitchers are throwing the ball as hard as they can, they often miss their target, which results in longer at-bats. Maddux, on the other hand, was able to end at-bats quicker by ensuring each pitch he threw was exactly how he wanted it. The phrase "a Maddux" was even coined, which means to throw a complete game under over 100 pitches. He was the best in MLB history at completing this feat, doing so 13 times. In fact, he did this 3 times within 1 month in 1997. It took him 90 pitches to do it against the Phillies, 84 against the Yankees, and 78 against the Cubs. He finished his career as the first pitcher in MLB history to win 4 straight Cy Youngs, became only the 13th pitcher to throw 5,000 innings, as well as the 9th to top 3,000 strikeouts and 300 wins. So as if it wasn't enough being one of the greatest pitchers of all time, he was also one of the best defenders, winning the Gold Glove Award 18 out of 19 times from 1990 to 2008. Which makes it no surprise with accolades such as these, he was voted into the Hall of Fame after just his first year on the ballot.
As I entered my sophomore year in high school, I was lucky enough to have Ralph Meter as my first true pitching coach. He taught me my basic pitching fundamentals: movement, location, the ability to change speeds, and velocity, in that order. Movement and location will last longer than hard and straight. At first, just like any other kid, all I wanted to do was throw hard, but as I matured, I realized how right he was. On behalf of my family and all those I've mentioned, thank you for this incredible honor.
He wasn't an athletic freak growing up. He struggled during his first couple seasons at the majors, and he even wanted to quit early on in his career. But he stuck through it all and carved out a Hall of Fame career. Not only that, he etched his name on the Mount Rushmore of starting pitchers in baseball history. Because whatever he did on the mound, it seemed as though he physically couldn't miss a pitch. But on the other side of the ball, do you want to learn about a player who seemingly could never miss a swing? A player who would frustrate pitchers by hitting home runs on pitches 5 inches out of the strike zone, and even hit balls that bounced before reaching home plate. Then click the video on your screen to find out how Vladimir Guerrero did exactly that.